All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Julie Kagi. I'm the Director of Operations with ESCA, the Exhibition Services and Contractors Association. And on the phone with us today, we have two members of one of our partners, Employco. Rob Wilson and Jason Eisenhut are joining us today with Employco. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thanks for having us, Julie.
Yeah. Rob, do you want to take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about Employco?
Sure. So we've been just celebrating our 25th anniversary. We have been active in the trade show industry and members of ESCA for a couple of decades. So we provide payroll processing, handle all the fringes, provide workers' comp. Jason oversees HR operations, so we provide HR to all of our clients. And then if non-union clients need health insurance, we buy that in volume. So, and we work in every major market in the country, all 50 states.
It's a brilliant resource, and it's a great way to keep down overhead and still provide your employees with all the necessary tools. So, and you guys have been such wonderful partners to us. Thank you for always stepping in when we have all of these questions. And what sort of prompted this today was just the myriad of questions that I've been getting. That today I'm kind of looking at our questions, and it's a bit of a potluck, right? Questions from across the board. So we're going to keep this a pretty open dialogue. If anybody has any questions as we're talking, raise your hand, type it in the Q&A, type it in the chat. We're also recording this session so that it'll be posted for those that weren't able to join us today. I know it's tough on a Friday afternoon, and very excitingly, people are getting back to work. So that's a great problem to have. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. So our first section of questions are related to the government. So from what I understand, former employees may be eligible for free COBRA. Can you guys tell me a little bit more about this and give us some information?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's an interesting program. So if an employee loses their job due to involuntary termination or a loss of hours, so they can't quit, they can't resign, they can't retire, but if they have involuntarily been terminated or loss of hours, they could be eligible for free COBRA. The government is paying for that COBRA through a tax credit against the company's Medicare taxes. So this COBRA is typically for companies who have 20 or more employees. That's the federal COBRA. If you have less than 20 employees, that might fall into what's called mini COBRA. Like here in Illinois, we have a mini COBRA plan for employers that have less than 20 employees. So probably regardless of your size, definitely if you have over 20 employees. If you have under, could be up to kind of looking at the state rules, but if you have over 20 employees, your former participants that can go pretty far back could be eligible for free COBRA. You can kind of collect that premium through the Medicare taxes. But as long as that person, and it's kind of on the honor system, isn't eligible for a new group plan, so they haven't moved on to a new company, a new employer, and that employer offers coverage, or they've retired and offered eligible for Medicare. But outside of being eligible for a new plan and they were involuntarily terminated, they could have that free COBRA.
Is there any time constraints on that?
So as long as they're still within their 18-month window, that's okay. But if you were involuntarily terminated 2 years ago, you would not be eligible.
Right. Got it. Okay, perfect. So from here, let's move on to the PPP program. So how long do companies have to submit their forgiveness applications?
So they have up until 10 months after their last day of covered period. So you look at not when you received it, but the very last day. So in last year and this year, your last day is 24 weeks after you receive it. So after that 24-week period, you have 10 months to apply. And if you apply, if you don't apply, it'll go into loan repayment, and it's a pretty short window for loan repayment. But if you apply for forgiveness, they'll go through the calculation. It usually takes, what we've seen with our clients, is about 2 to 4 months for the SBA to do the forgiveness, and the unforgiven part will then convert to a loan that you'll be able to pay out over time.
Okay, and now when you talk about that loan forgiveness, I know there's different choices on that application for how many weeks you can select, and that's really one of the few choices that you have, correct?
Right.
Are there benefits to some of those different options?
And so what we would recommend, what we have to all of our clients, is to take the 24-week instead of the 8-week, because The difference between this year and last year is last year you had to pick between PPP and the employee retention tax credit. This year you can have both, but you can't use the same payroll dollars for the tax credit as well as the PPP. So even though the PPP is 2.5 months of payroll, I would recommend spreading that out over across 24 weeks. So that way you can, each quarter, you can maximize both credits.
Are any
So use the longer period.
Use the longer period.
I'm pardon.
No, that's okay. Anything that you would caution people or advise them in order to do the best they can to ensure that they get that forgiveness?
And so, take a look at, make sure that you're including all applicable, your payroll, the taxes, your insurance, and then of course, maximize the non-payroll portion as well.
Yeah, and contact your payroll provider. So we have a custom PPP program report that we provide to our clients. So your payroll provider, hopefully you're not having to go through and adding up the specific, okay, here's our payroll, and then get a different report for health insurance and a different report for the state unemployment. So hopefully the payroll provider makes your life easy to have an all-in-one PPP report, kind of makes it easy for the forgiveness application.
Right, and where it gets a little bit trickier is so we can do the PPP report for you, but if you have the tax retention credit, which is that's up to $7,000, 70% of $10,000 per quarter per employee. And so if somebody, say just for ease of math, makes $40,000 a year, you can use a tax credit for $7,000 per quarter. So, but you can't use the tax credit payroll and the PPP dollars at the same time. So you'd want to use the 7,000 per quarter, and then on top of that, keep track of your PPP. So that's why it makes sense to drag your PPP out against a longer period, because it's a fair amount of the tax credit. Like in our case, our tax credit is substantially bigger than our PPP.
Okay, perfect. So Dale Hunt has a question here. He says, what are all areas included in the non-payroll forgivable expense?
So I think it is, I'm sorry, Julie.
No, he's wondering if it's IT, legal, accounting, what are all areas?
Typically, those are the software systems. So like companies who use us couldn't use our fees paying us as a payroll provider or an HR provider. But if they're purchasing a computer system, like an accounting system or something like that, that IT, the system, the software could be used as non-payroll eligible. But if you're paying an accounting firm to go through an audit, that would not be an eligible expense.
So Jason, do you want to run through all the eligible non-payroll expenses?
I don't have them tip of my finger, but so it includes, let's see how good my memory is. If you suffered expenses due to looting or rioting, like expenditures on fixing your building,
rent, transportation, and they've never really fully defined the transportation side.
Yep, rent.
Rent is one of your biggest issues that you see from an expense standpoint. And what we can post out too, if you guys, we can post out or send out a list of everything.
Perfect. Dale, thank you so much for that question. Okay, moving on. So are we expecting any new significant employment laws over the next several months?
It depends on what everyone defines as significant, but I think we're going to continue to see a few remaining states require the employers in their state to cover COVID vaccine absences. So the employee doesn't force to take unpaid time off to get a vaccine, or if it's 2 or 3 days of an adverse reaction, something like that. So we're probably going to see a few trickling states come in and force employers to pay those. We already have ARPA and FFCRA for companies who have under 500 employees. That's a tax credit where the government will help you pay for employees absent due to vaccine or adverse reaction. Outside of that, we'll probably continue to see states require employers go through annual sexual harassment training, so in Illinois now, this will be our 2nd year of annual sexual harassment training, but I think we'll still see a few remaining states over the next 12 to 18 months pass similar laws requiring their employers to go through annual sexual harassment training for their employees. And I think one that's coming up is starting in 2022, any federal contractors, that federal minimum wage will be $15 an hour if you do contract work with the government.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see more, just given the makeup of the Congress right now and some of Biden's executive orders that he's done. I would not be surprised if you see many more laws come into effect in the next year or so that will affect you from an HR standpoint.
Okay, any indication of what those many more will be or what tone they're going to have?
Well, so far what you've seen, I mean, that's very pro-employee. So you're seeing OSHA's made, OSHA's being more active across the country. I think it's going to be very much more, he's shown he's much more pro-union than pro-business. And so it's hard to say what he's going to enact, but I think you're going to see more compliance issues for companies.
One I'm curious about to see how much traction it gets is paid family leave. So right now we have FMLA that provides employees with unpaid time off up to 12 weeks. But I'm curious to see how much traction, how likely it is that we'll get paid family leave. Probably the same, like you get 12 weeks and maybe it's 66% of pay or something like that. But we'll see how that pans out.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. Now let's talk about the current federal unemployment, that $300 subsidy. When do we think that that's going to expire?
So that's going to expire on Labor Day, September 6th. And President Biden was speaking at somewhere today, and he referenced that he's not that it won't be extended. But at the same time, 25 states have already opted out and said they've terminated it because of the issue of so many people are on unemployment that they don't want to work.
I mean, that's a huge challenge right now. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's across the board. I mean, and especially I'm going to speak for, some of my union friends, they make more money going back to work than they would staying home. That's not
right.
deterring them. It's more of the hospitality industry that we're seeing, to the detriment that people just can't get enough employees. So that's definitely been a challenge. So we believe it's going to be Labor Day.
Right. So it's Labor Day. And so right now, anyone making less than $32,000 a year, you can actually make more on unemployment than you can working, between the state unemployment and the federal. And that's where we're seeing it a lot, as you said, hospitality. Our clients in the restaurant business, janitorial, anyone in that $15 an hour range, they're having a hard time recruiting people. And you're seeing a lot of companies that are providing incentives to come work for them.
Onboarding.
Julie, you mentioned like the union employees. So if a lot of employees we're hearing somewhat anecdotally, but if it was a waiter or waitress or a carpenter or a rigger electrician, maybe they're like, you know what, I'm kind of done on my feet. I want to go back to school to become whatever. So some people are changing careers, and the $300 per week is definitely affecting some ability to get employees back. But we're also hearing that some people are just changing careers, and hopefully that won't hurt the trade show industry too much.
I don't think we're seeing it quite as much. And so honestly speaking, just from a bit of conversation and speaking with ESCA has a labor and management council, and we've done a bit of digging into the retirement, that career change. And frankly, I don't think we're seeing it quite as much because they are so vested in the training that they put into that union, in their pension, in their benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So I always kind of equate it to, somebody who's a doctor deciding to change. Not, it's not quite the same, but you're really invested and it's a career choice. It's not something, you started doing. My bigger concern is with the more line staff that's not as, skilled, trained, qualified, or doesn't have that long onboarding period. And that's a real concern. And even as we go back to this fall run of business where we're seeing this incredibly condensed schedule, we have line staff that it's a complex job, and line staff that's going to require, training and onboarding with that. And we need them now so we can get them on board for fall. So that Labor Day timing might not be too bad. Okay, any questions about any of those government points? go ahead and type them in. And in the meantime, I am going to give Employco another little plug here. So Employco is ESCA's HR partner. And along with that, our having membership in ESCA membership has its rewards. But one of those is that we have the Employco app available to any of our members. And on there are a bunch of those trainings. So you mentioned the sexual harassment training. There's tons of OSHA training, and that's all free to our membership with the app. And I mean, how many trainings are on there now? Hundreds.
On the app, I mean, there's 30, 40, and the big ones are the sexual harassment training. There's forklift safety training, power tool, and stuff for office as well, like email etiquette. But also, once you move past the app, one of the things that we did when we partnered with ESCA to provide HR services a couple years ago is any member can contact Jason or our team. And so we've included for ESCA, it's several hours of free HR support for any member. So if you've got a question, hiring someone, terminating someone, no matter what it is, feel free to contact either one of us, and we'll help you.
And that comes in handy so many times, again, when people reach out and they're just not sure, and especially our smaller business members, and wondering who to contact and connect. We always send them your way, and it's just such a huge, huge benefit. So, and yeah, thank you for putting that. It is 2 hours of free consulting. And even as an ESCA member, I feel like we're on an infomercial now. Anything? No, you get a discount for if they do sign up for your services by being an ESCA member. So we've had a few people take advantage of that as well. So that's great. All right, so off of my selling soapbox here, let's talk about hiring. We just transitioned into that. So with we have that unemployment subsidy, and that's due to expire, but do you have any recommendations for companies that are struggling to find employees?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's not just kind of a unique one-off. I mean, we're seeing, there's a recent study that 44% of small business owners are still struggling to find talent, and it's the third straight month they're reporting that. So it is a tough time for so many small and mid-sized businesses. So what we're seeing or recommending, what's becoming pretty popular right now, is sign-on bonuses, and that could be from waiters and waitresses to a tech programmer. I mean, it could be any level of the company. Jimmy John's, here in Illinois, we love our hot dogs, and Portillo's is doing a sign-on bonus for their employees. So some employees, if you want to do more than just post and receive resumes or applications through Career Builder and things like that, and ZipRecruiter, Indeed, a lot of people are putting their profile either on LinkedIn or Twitter that I'm kind of hashtag ready to work, or I'm open to work. So if you want to go out and search for passive candidates, maybe look on Twitter or LinkedIn for people who are ready, and you can do some keyword searches and some filters, but look for passive candidates.
Yeah, and when you're also posting your job out, you want to stand out. You want your ad, your listing to stand out. So hype up not only what you do, but if you could include something about what are the benefits, because it's not just pay. It could be health insurance, could be vacation. Is it a combination of in-person versus remote? So the more information you can provide about the company and the perks, it goes a long way.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're at all open for a younger workforce, depending on how young, but maybe TikTok. I mean, although my kids are on it, but I think more and more older people are joining the ranks of teenagers, and maybe it's now people in their 20s are on TikTok, and it's not just for the historical way we've been thinking about it. And
we're still waiting for Jason to create the Employco TikTok video. So.
It's going to be a while. So also consider some unique perks. If you really want to stand out, including your job ad or on Facebook or Reddit or something like that, maybe you're going to pay a membership for someone's Netflix or their Spotify, paid Spotify membership for a year. Just something to stand out a little bit that could grab someone's attention. And like Rob said, you really want to advertise some different things you're doing. Maybe it's a welcome message from the CEO on YouTube. Maybe it's a kind of a tour of the office. I mean, iPhones nowadays are such good 4K quality video. You could just have someone walk around your office, almost like a drone walking through. You can just kind of give a tour, and everybody can see what your office or warehouse or work site is like. Just kind of new and creative ways to look through it.
And then look at your internal employees, and you may want to think about out, we do it in our office, an employee referral bonus. So we give any of our employees that recommend somebody that's hired 60 to 90 days after they start, the internal employee that referred the person gets a bonus.
Man, those are all great tips. So we got, tell them the whole package. It's not just about that hourly rate. It's everything else that goes with it. You can stop paying COBRA, et cetera, et cetera. It's using different platforms to look for staff, show them the environment, tell them, I think that's brilliant. I've never seen anybody do that before. I haven't looked for a job in a little while, but I think that's great. I would love to know, the space, the vibe, the environment, and the referral bonus. And then, Jason, you started out by talking about that sign-on bonus. What strings do you attach to that?
So it's probably a length of service. So maybe you pay 50% of the $500 or $300. Maybe you pay 50% their first payroll and say, we'll pay the remaining 50% at the 90-day mark or something like that. So give them a little bit now and a little bit in 3 months from now.
Okay, so depending on complexity of job and how long that training and onboarding and what type of commitment you want. I think those are all great tips. Okay, so if a company is getting ready to hire a new employee, is there anything that's changed regarding to criminal background screenings, drug testing? I mean, with all the laws right now, or with all the legalization of marijuana, et cetera, I think that that's a very confusing gray area. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So people are still drug testing and doing background checks, even with recreational and medical marijuana across the majority of the states. Many are still testing for marijuana just because it becomes part of the test, but they're really not. If someone tests positive, you're not seeing them be excluded from the position outside of transportation. So there's a whole nother set of rules for Department of Transportation on the trucking side, but. So you're still seeing it from the drug test and background check, and then Jason, from ban the box standpoint.
Yeah, so I mean, each state is a little bit different in terms of whether or not you can discipline an employee for like a failed drug test or refuse to hire the person based on a failed drug test, especially in the marijuana category, since now like states like Illinois have the recreational part, or criminal. So if you do have a positive hit on a drug test or criminal background screen, don't be pretty quick to dismiss the person. Really consult someone like us. And we have those 2 free hours for the ESCA members. Give us a call. Let us know what state you're in, what kind of position. Let us know kind of the details. And we'll kind of give you some guidance on, okay, if it was a DUI from 8 years ago and it's an accounting position, you really can't hold that against the person. But if it's theft 2 years ago, it's in an accounting role, then you can. So each state's a little bit different, but yeah, make sure you consult kind of a subject matter expert in this area if you are thinking about not hiring the person after a failed test.
So now we find ourselves in this unique position where we're rehiring people that we've laid off, right? Any advice on, I've heard people doing it both ways. They just bring them back on. And I just heard a unique story about a longtime employee that as they rehired, they redid background checks and drug screening on everybody and found something in the person's file that was pre the first employment. So they didn't catch it the first time, they catch it on a rehire. They already worked for them in that period in the middle. And the concern was, we've already rehired them. What kind of legal gray area are we putting ourselves in? If we said it was okay the first time, why is it not now? So with that rehire, what do you recommend, or what guidance would you provide?
Okay, so if it truly is a rehire, so a lot of employers had kind of wrestled between furlough and layoff at the beginning of COVID. So furlough is kind of an unpaid leave of absence. They're still an active employee, but they're on an unpaid leave of absence. So those you probably don't want to go through a pre-employment drug test or criminal background screen. But if they really did end their employment, they were offered COBRA, you're rehiring them, then you could, hopefully your policies can make sure you're consistent with other rehires. So if you're rehiring some, and just make sure you put them all through criminal background screens or none, don't pick or choose. And if I can plug a vendor kind of a way, so one of the vendors we use for our criminal background screens does an extremely thorough job of investigating the person's criminal background screen. So you can go the cheap route and do a $5 to $10 kind of instant database search and give you results within 5-10 minutes. But we recommend the thorough route for just about any position, because then it'll send like a live runner to the county courthouse to thumb through files, because not all of those make it to searchable databases. And you'll find stuff. So if that employer you're talking about maybe did the quick database search 8 years ago and now they're doing the more thorough one, it definitely could be possible and it makes sense. Just be consistent is kind of my 2 cents and my recommendation.
Okay, perfect. So what about the latest best practices for new hire onboarding? Especially now, a lot of people are bringing people back en masse. What do you recommend?
So a few things. One, from an onboarding standpoint, we recommend take a look at your entire process, and that onboarding for a new hire should be 3 to 6 months long. So it's not just, years ago, here's your desk, here's your email, there's where the coffee is, and get to work. Now it's we really look at creating a 3 to 6 month process, looking at create a checklist and make sure it's consistent for all new hires. And one of the things to look at too is what's the pre-hire process? What are you going to do before they get here? One of the things that, and Jason can kind of run through the checklist, but one of the things that we do when we hire somebody is our marketing team does a kind of a pre-interview with them. And so we'll send a communication out to everybody, and here's their picture, here's their, the 4 or 5 questions that we'll ask them. What's your favorite food? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? And it helps break the ice. Everyone internally has then gotten a chance to kind of meet the person electronically before they meet them in person on their first day, making them feel as welcome as they can. But Jason, the pre-check list is like, who are you going to talk to? When do you show up? Who do you speak to? And and walk through that whole process.
Yeah, and so to stay on this pre-day one kind of a thought process, it's not so much, hey, here's your offer, you're accepted. We'll see you on this day. Check on, like, when you get here, ask for this person. That's great. And some companies even miss that, but continue to stay in touch with that person. Maybe the Friday before the Monday they're supposed to show up, send them an email or a text or a phone call. Hey, we're really looking forward. How's everything going? Make sure you have a nice weekend. Is there any last, just kind of making sure that they feel really welcome and that they're excited to join the company. Maybe have an email from the HR person, the president, the CEO, the office manager, and vary that communication. This is all before day one to really get them ramped up. And like Rob said, the little things, make sure their desk is clean. And
yeah, nothing worse than starting. You come to work your first day and you got a dirty desk.
Use toenail clipper.
Supplies, right?
Right.
All right. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
So we're
one of the things, yeah, and one of the things, as you talk about hiring people in masses too, is what is that hiring? Paperwork. Are you doing that paperwork electronically now? Especially, one person is pretty easy to do paper, but you're hiring, you've got a mass hiring, you're bringing on 25, 30 people. Can you do it electronically? Whether it's your, like in our case, you've got your I-9 and W-4, but you've got a safety video. Maybe you're looking at sexual harassment training, a variety of things. How much of that do you want to do online prior to day one? Because pre-pandemic, you'd have all those 25, 50 people in some area to go through that training. And now, how often are you in a room where there's, 25 or 50 people? So there's more and more people gathering, but the more things that you could do, the generic things in bulk, try and do it online.
So then when day one hits, then we've got it's standard stuff like give them a tour of the office and try and think as though you're a new person. Like, although I've been with Employco 9 years, I try and still put myself in the shoes of a new person. Like, do they know where to park? Do they know that they can park anywhere? Do they know that lunch, they could take any lunch that they want, maybe clear it with their manager? Do they know that they can take the staircase or the elevator? Like, there's these little things that once you've been with a company for a long time, you kind of lose sight of. So you may want to also involve recent new hires to take a look at your onboarding. Like, okay, what did you like about our onboarding? What are some things that you'd recommend we do differently, and continually take a look at it once every couple of years? What does that onboarding system look like? And one thing we've also done, COVID kind of put a stop on it temporarily, but take that new person out to lunch on their first day, or buy them lunch if they're kind of a blue collar, gray collar employee that they can't get out to a restaurant. That little touch of buying them lunch on their first day goes a long way. And then beyond that, week 1, week 2, and beyond, start with small projects, celebrate their success. schedule frequent check-ins, whether or not that's the supervisor and HR president, and that should be two-way feedback and check-in sessions. Not only do we tell the new hire how we think they're doing, but we need to ask them, how do you think we're doing? Like, what are you seeing as a new hire? Are there any things that you're missing? Are there tools or equipment you're missing? Is there education or training you think you could improve on? So it's a two-way feedback. Schedule it at 1 week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days. Try and get that on the calendar to make sure it's not missed.
I think that's great. And I love
All right.
almost everything you said circled back to reviewing what you're doing, getting feedback, questioning, checking in. What started with review your current hiring process and ended with, check in with them and review what's going on at the end. I think all too often we just do things because that's the way we've always done things, and it becomes a habit. And when you don't check in with people from the outside looking in, and so not only solicit that feedback, sometimes people try and provide it and we don't always hear it and listen for it. I think that that's really a great thing. I love everything that you guys just said, and honestly, it gives me a little bit of fresh eyes for the process too. So any questions about hiring from anybody here in our audience today? All right, now we're going to move on and talk a little bit about life after COVID. So what are you seeing companies do with employees who historically were working out of an office? Are you seeing most companies go back to in-person work, hybrid, one or the other? What are we seeing?
So it's been pretty much a mixed bag. I would say your smaller companies, entrepreneurial companies are putting people back, and many have been back for quite some time, or a combination of in-person, spreading that time out between in-person and remote. Your larger companies, like in Chicago, BMO Harris Bank, they just had 1,000 of their mid-market employees, their bankers, go back to their LaSalle Street location. So you're seeing more of that. Google's going back in their Chicago office, still letting a day or two remote, but companies they're wanting their employees back in the office. And some have moved who might have said the end of the year or September have moved up to June and July. So it's coming back quicker. The vaccine is spread out far enough that you're seeing companies be more comfortable bringing people back into the office. The larger the company, probably the longer the runway is to bring people back. One of the things that we've been seeing, Jason, at our office is working with our clients is the employees that were remote like it, and do they really want to come back? So that's become an issue for a lot of companies. I'm used to taking a break midday and going outside or walking my dog or taking my kids to school, and now you're back in the office. They don't want to be back in the office 5 days. So what is that hybrid? What does that look like going forward? So that's going to be your biggest challenge, especially if you're recruiting new talent. Someone that's just worked remotely, they may want to continue that, and others may want to be back in the office. So it's definitely seeing a mix of it.
Yeah, and Apple just announced within this week that they're going to be in September bringing their employees back, but they're going to be doing hybrid. So it'll be, I think, Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays in the office for all employees, and then Wednesdays and Fridays it's your option or the manager's option to do hybrid. So I think that might be somewhat common. Like Rob said, I think one of the recent studies said 83% of workers want a hybrid model now. They do see the advantages of it. It'll help on recruiting. And for any employers like that, I was in this camp, I'll be honest, like I was worried about employees not being as productive at home during COVID and remote than I was all of us being in the office. But the Wall Street Journal just had a study that they reviewed 7,000 employees by reviewing their email, their cloud-based software, and those employees overall were more productive and worked longer hours in 2020 compared to 2019. So I, as a manager, feel better that, okay, so if someone is working hybrid, I have trust and faith in them. I don't think I ever want to go back 5 days a week remote, because I do think the value of camaraderie and teamwork and collaboration and bouncing ideas off in meetings, I personally see the value of a hybrid. So, but on those off days where people can work from home, I do have confidence that they'll be productive, and if they need to, they'll work long hours and things like that.
You know, where we've had some discussions with some of our clients that, for example, in financial services that have younger, younger employees, recent college graduates that have been in the workforce for a couple of years, what they've missed during that remote period is that mentoring from being in the workplace with the older employees. So that's something that you've got to figure out is how, in those cases, they wanted to get those employees back because it's part of their development.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you're right. I mean, there are pros and cons to both. I personally work from home, and I invented that hybrid model way back before this whole thing happened. But there are pros. When you work very long hours in our industry, we all travel a lot. Working from home means I can skip the commute and walk down the stairs. But frankly, it also means until about 7 at night, my computer is next door to me, regardless of what I'm doing. You know, I might throw in a load of laundry, but I'm right back here. And I really am apt to work longer and work more. And sometimes you get more done. Flip side, I love what you're saying about being in the office. And it's also idea networking, problem solving with those people, and learning together. Did you know this? Did you see this? So.
And,
okay.
and that's what you see that in Jason's department. He talks about it often where our HR department has, there's half a dozen people together and someone learns something new and, how easy is it to stand up and, as a kind of an open workspace, like, hey, I just learned something new. Are you guys aware of X, Y, and Z, which it's harder to do that remote.
Absolutely. And then with innovation and technology and enhancements, that's definitely something that you don't get as much when you're away. But the hybrid model, I think that's a great idea. So now let's talk about COVID-19 and getting back into the offices. So vaccination, masking, sanitation, social distancing. What do you think that employers should be aware of as it relates and as we get back to work and get back in offices?
That's a great question and pretty open-ended. And as we've seen, I was talking to a couple of trade show clients yesterday that we were together, and how your industry did such a great job during the kind of the closed down period of creating the health and wellness committees, and how is it making trade shows as safe as possible. The biggest restriction that trade shows had, though, was that the states had restrictions, so you really couldn't be outside of Florida and Texas. The trade shows were pretty restricted. So having said that, when we look at some clients are wanting to know, are you vaccinated or not vaccinated, as the mask mandate has changed substantially over just the last month or so. Some clients are tracking the vaccine, others aren't. You just have to be careful if we put our HR hat on, if you're asking them, how are you asking and how deep are you going into details? Because it's typically you can't ask somebody health related questions due to HIPAA, but with COVID you can, but you want to be pretty restrictive of that. And you have to look at too, what does that hybrid look like? Are you socially distancing? Do you have, a lot of companies spend a lot of money putting up the sneeze guards or the plexiglass between desks and one-way stairwells. And Jason, that's something that your team was pretty inundated with over the last 6 months, is how do I reopen?
Yeah, and maybe it starts with the survey. Like, do you feel comfortable coming back to the office? And maybe it could be anonymous. Maybe it's not. Probably in this case, you don't. It's kind of a pro and con of both, make it anonymous or not. But so many employees now are fully vaccinated that even without an employer requiring it, they just want to on their own get fully vaccinated. So in those cases, now we know that they can work in close quarters and mask free. So it really is a new ball game almost every month dealing with this. But yeah, so if an employer, make sure the safety is there, making sure you kind of has the right cleaning in place and janitorial, custodial before, after hours, things like that. If someone does come down with COVID, make sure you look at the quarantine rules that are in place at the time. But kind of create a team to look at the return to work action plan. So maybe that's a few employees in a variety of different departments, different areas of the building, different job functions. What are you concerned about with returning to work? What do you see the same pathway that everybody walks to get to the printer or the punch machine or the time clock machine? So kind of walk through those safety hazards. But after that, maybe you kind of make sure you over communicate to your employees. Tell them this is kind of what we're thinking. This is the plan. Please let us know if you have any concerns. And then allow, if you can, a kind of a gradual or hybrid remote work. So going cold turkey and everybody's full remote to full on site, that may not be the best. Try and do a hybrid. So not just for social distancing, but people's anxiety, and they were with their dogs or with their kids. And it was nice having lunch with my spouse and things like that. So trying to get back hybrid as phase one is a really nice way to kind of get that back started.
I think that's great. So then what about the vaccination? You mentioned that most people are doing it on their own anyway. I heard at the beginning of all this that certain employers were requiring it. If you didn't get it, they were terminating employment. You know, you hear this hodgepodge of stories. What is your advice to employers as it relates to the vaccine, to having those conversations with employees, and where they're sort of crossing into legal murky water?
So I don't know at this point if requiring employees is the way to go. Outside of a healthcare type employer, I'm maybe aware of one or two, even like United Airlines isn't requiring their employees yet to get the vaccine. So we strongly recommend, and I do, that it's either strongly encouraging or educating, but not requiring. Because once you start requiring, then workers' comp claims come into play, and maybe some liability if there's an adverse reaction. So if you just encourage and educate, you're mostly free of a lot of those concerns.
Okay.
And Jason, track or don't track?
Yeah, that's a whole nother boat. So if you are requiring it, that's a layer of administrative work. So you're going to have to track every employee. If you're requiring it, you're going to have to track who's not, who is, and who's not, and make sure that if you are going to require it, that you have the right questions on that kind of attestation honor form. Are you going to require a copy of the vaccine card? What if the person lost it? Is the attestation form good enough? And the answer would be probably yes. So just make sure. And then on the attestation form, have you been vaccinated? Yes or no? Give us the last date of your final vaccine. That should be probably it. It shouldn't go into, if you're not fully vaccinated, please provide a reason why. Because then you can get into Americans with disabilities with like someone who's diabetes or asthma or something like that, or sincerely held religious beliefs. Disability and sincerely held religious beliefs are definitely ways that employees have the legitimate exception to get out of a required vaccine.
So then as we talk about that proof of vaccination and, travel and even, events, those who are vaccinated count, don't count, can get in, can't get in. Do you foresee a standardization in that proof of vaccination nationwide? Do you see those, there's that registry, right? Do you see that being released? How will we handle that? And what is to stop somebody who's not vaccinated from saying, yeah, I'm vaccinated, and getting in and skirting around that? How do you?
Yeah, and I don't think you're going to see a vaccine passport. They threw that around, at least on the federal level. There's a few states that are, Pritzker was talking about it, and then it kind of went away. There's states like Florida that said they're absolutely not doing it, wouldn't allow it. So you're looking at the honor system where you're having people show a copy of their card, and you hope that, you see on Facebook people post out blank cards. So, you're taking people at one on the honor system, and at the same time, there are statistics out. Every day and every week, you're getting stats published both in your own states as well as on the federal side. Illinois, I think we're just about 65% federally. I think it's about 50. In our office, we're about 92%. So you can keep track of it. At some point, there's enough people.
And the EEOC has, so if you don't want to go the required route, you want to go the encourage, and you hope employees do get vaccinated, you can go the route of encouraging through an incentive. So the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, recently said that's okay as long as it's not, the incentive isn't so significant that it becomes coercive. So that might even be $500 is probably even okay to incentivize an employee to get a vaccine. But if you're starting to get into like 30% of their pay and something like that, that's probably getting to the point where you're coercing the person to get
Right.
the vaccine and gets to be too substantial.
And the most common that you're seeing is, if it's a $500 or a day or two off, because you've had some people had a reaction to it. So we've seen a lot of companies saying, all right, you can take a day off or 2 days off if after your second vaccination, so you're not using your sick time.
Perfect. So we have a question here, and this is a really good question coming in from Debbie Rohrbaugh. Hi, Debbie. I feel like a DJ. Call number one, you're on the air. But there's some shows that are requiring all attendees, all exhibitors on the show to prove and be vaccinated. We've specifically two healthcare shows that are requiring this. So how do you suggest that employers handle this? When they're trying to staff an event, do they say, hey, if you've been vaccinated, can you volunteer to work this show? But what if the staff that's, it could be in a remote city or something like that, where the staff that you have available isn't 100% vaccinated? How do you recommend we handle this? I mean, honestly, I think it has to be something that you consider during the bidding process. But here we are, we're going into the fall. This is, vaccine time. A show determines that they want everybody to be 100% vaccinated. How should an employer handle that if an employee doesn't want to be vaccinated? And how do we handle proving that they are vaccinated?
Okay, so the trick, so we checked with an attorney we work pretty closely with, and it is legal that the show, especially like the healthcare, I'm sure that's going to be primarily where those shows and exhibitors want to, that is on the healthcare side. So it is legal for them to require it at this point. We believe it's legal. And we also believe it's legal that you could be forced into sending only vaccinated employees to those shows. So where we would kind of worry about, and our attorney worries about, is someone with a disability or a sincerely held religious belief that's not vaccinated, and they've been adversely affected by this decision. They're out of work. They can't work the same number of hours because as their counterparts who did get the vaccine, so it puts them at a disadvantage. So are you looking at a discrimination claim because you only sent vaccinated employees to the show or to do the work? I'm scared about it. So some of our friends in the industry have pushed back on the shows, and so far they're kind of thinking that it's going to be okay that they send the unvaccinated employees, but it's really going to be up in the air in the final hour whether or not it's going to be admissible or not. But yeah, because they're pushing back and say, okay, not only do we have to worry about people with disabilities and sincerely held religious beliefs, but we for sure can't force the union to do that. That opens up a whole nother. So if you're in a city or a show that doesn't require union labor, that might give you a little bit more leeway. But boy, I don't see the ability to force a union into having their members be vaccinated. But I know in some of the locals that you can pick vaccinated as a check down box on kind of your call list to make sure you're only calling vaccinated employees. So it's going to be very interesting, and I'm sure we're going to see some lawsuits one way or the other on it.
Right, you have seen that on some locals where you can, on your labor request, you can request vaccinated as well as OSHA compliant or OSHA trained.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a very interesting and unique challenge. There are collective bargaining agreements in place that would pose a massive challenge to, as well as filling those labor calls with that skilled labor. So
Right.
I think those conversations have to happen well in advance of that decision being made, and make sure that all these questions are being asked before you go down that road. So we do have another question here regarding shows with vaccination requirements for the crew. There was a client that's, it says, we had a client speak with their client and they eased up on it, and they now have unvaccinated, testing on site. Now, I think, Bill, thank you so much for sending that in. I think that is the brilliant way to handle that. If you're vaccinated, great, go through line A. If you're not, great, go through line B and let's do some testing. And then that covers it. There is cost associated with that. So, you need to determine well in advance who's going to pay for that cost. And then there's other ways to do it too. Testing X number of days beforehand, just like they handle travel now, is definitely an interesting solution. So for those that hold a whiz badge, we track training with our whiz badges. We also have a field for vaccination to be included in there now. But that's voluntary, not required. So, okay.
And the cost of testing has come down it's so much cheaper now than it was 6 months ago. And the rapid tests not only are they cheap, but it takes a couple minutes.
Absolutely. Honestly, really at this point, almost couldn't be any easier. So that's great to know. All right. Well, with that, we have about 10 minutes left. Let me ask, are there any other questions from the audience? So, okay, sorry, I'm reading questions and follow-up here. We had a follow-up there from Bill. Sorry, Bill. Yeah, I got your typo there. And you're right. Bill says, everybody's kind of making this up as they go along. So we're all sort of figuring this out together. And I think that that's the most important thing with all of these HR issues and concerns and questions is communication, and communication well up front, whether you're making those decisions about how to lay out your office to bring people back, how to hire, how to interview, or what's going on with the government is communication and research and having these conversations up front. So what else did I miss, guys? Anything else you think that we should cover today in our HR potluck power hour?
No, I mean, you fielded a lot of great questions, and those are all pretty consistent on the minds of our clients. So it's, life after COVID is just such a huge topic right now. Illinois next Friday, we go into phase 5, unless he, and who knows if the governor's going to throw in a couple more phases here or there. But with restrictions lifting out across the country, our people have a lot of questions. Not just the employers, but the employees as they're coming back to work.
And there's so much uncertainty.
If anybody on the call does have a question, you can reach us at hr@employco.com. That's our email address. So hr@employco.com. That comes to me and a couple other people, but I can definitely look at it and help you out. Like we said, we've got those 2 free hours for the ESCA members, so we're happy to help any way we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. If there's no other questions from the audience, I just really want to thank you both. Every time I ask, you guys are always there, whether it's my random question that I get from the field or for doing stuff like this. We really appreciate you. For those of you in the audience, if you do have any further questions, we're definitely planning on doing this again in the future. So please send me any questions, send us any concerns. You're probably not the only one, to Bill's point, that has this question. So I can't thank you enough. And Rob and Jason, you are the consummate professionals and such a wealth of information. Thank you so very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be on anytime. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.